The late autumn air in Brookline, Massachusetts, carried a crisp bite. A damp wind rustled through the maple trees at the end of Hawthorne Street, plastering wet, golden leaves to the pavement after a persistent drizzle. From a neighbor's kitchen, the distant, savory aroma of a simmering beef stew mingled with the crisp air. Inside my own home, however, the chill came from something else entirely. Rules. My name is Laura, and I've been a daughter-in-law for a year. I live in a 3-story Victorian, a house that stands as tall and imposing as the authority of my mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance. My husband, Tom, is a kind man who adores me, but the moment his mother speaks, he seems to shrink, his confidence evaporating. Our son Leo is 4, and our daughter, Mia, is 2. For their sake, I once believed in the mantra, pick your battles. That was until I realized that yielding too often wasn't keeping the peace. It was an open invitation for others to trample on my dignity. In this house, the rules were unspoken but absolute, to the point where placing a spoon incorrectly in the silverware drawer would earn a sharp glance. Dishes had to be loaded into the dishwasher with architectural precision, bowls facing the proper direction. Slippers left by the front door had to be pointed outwards, to welcome prosperity. Eleanor never yelled when I made a mistake. She'd just look at me and deliver a quiet, perfectly aimed remark that left my face burning with shame. A daughter-in-law who knows her place keeps the peace, she'd say. It sounded like guidance, but it was a gag order. Outsiders who met Eleanor often complimented her. Mrs. Vance is so elegant, so well-spoken. And she was. Her words were like polished knives, never crude, never raised in volume, but every sentence had a point. I was once corrected in front of the entire extended family for overpouring a glass of wine. Eleanor smiled gently and said, "Clumsiness can be corrected with practice, my dear. To not practice is to choose a difficult life." The dinner table fell silent. I swallowed my food, the taste a bitter mix of humiliation and anger. Tom wasn't a bad man. He knew how to rock Mia to sleep and always remembered to buy the organic yogurt Leo loved. But whenever I asked him, "Can you please talk to your mother for me?" he would sigh. "Just try to understand, Laura. She's always been particular." One day, I snapped quietly, "Are you my husband or her star pupil?" He gave a familiar, strained smile. "She raised me, Laura." The word duty sounds warm, but when misplaced, it becomes an excuse. Then, on a Friday evening, the world tilted. I had just returned from the farmer's market, my bags filled with fresh cod, kale, and a jar of artisanal pickles. With the weather turning cold, I planned to make a hearty lemon herb soup. Leo was chasing squirrels in the backyard, and Mia was clinging to my leg, demanding to be held. As I was rinsing the fish, Eleanor descended the stairs. She wore a plum-colored cashmere sweater, her lipstick a shade redder than usual. She sat at the dining table and lightly tapped her chopsticks against the rim of her bowl, a signal that she was about to hold court. "I have something to tell you," she announced slowly. Tom put down his fork. "Yes, Mom? What is it?" She lifted her teacup, blowing on it with unhurried grace. "I'm getting married." I froze. Leo, ever innocent, looked up. "Who are you marrying, Grandma?" Mia clapped her hands, thinking it was a game. Tom blurted out, "Mom, what are you talking about?" Eleanor looked him straight in the eye. "His name is Dylan. He's 23. 23. The number buzzed in my ears. I don't judge anyone's love, but the age gap sent a shiver down my spine. Tom's face went pale. "Have you thought this through?" he asked weakly. Eleanor set her cup down with a sharp clack. "I have spent my entire life living for my children. Now, I'm going to live for myself. Anyone who interferes will have to answer for it." The words weren't loud, but they landed with the weight of granite. I remembered my own grandmother saying, "Patience is a virtue, but don't be so patient you become a doormat." I tried to maintain my composure. "Of course, Eleanor, if you're happy, then we're happy for you." Eleanor's lips curled into a faint smirk. "That's a very sensible thing to say." Sensible meant silent. Tom turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Don't embarrass her." Eleanor delivered the final blow, swift and decisive. "The wedding is next week. It will be a small, tasteful affair, but it must be done properly. Laura, you will help me with the arrangements. This family will not be a subject of gossip." I was speechless. "Next week? That's so soon." She stared at me, her voice cold. "The timing is my business. You would do well to remember your place." The words "your place" fell onto the table with a dry, hollow sound. Tom quickly intervened. Of course, Mom. We'll handle everything. She stood up. Good. Now eat. I'm going upstairs. As she turned, I noticed a manila folder in her hand. She walked straight up to the third floor, the sanctuary where she kept her financial records, the deed to the house, and the ultimate authority in this family. Tom sat there, deflated, as if all the air had been sucked out of him. I waited for him to say something, anything to acknowledge the absurdity of it all, even just to ask me if I was okay. But he only sighed. Just try to get through this, Laura. Her mind is made up. I replied in a whisper, so quiet it angered even myself. Okay, I'm used to it. I was used to it. But inside me, I heard a small, sharp crack, the sound of something breaking. In the days that followed, our three-story house felt like a disturbed beehive. People came and went. The phone rang constantly. Eleanor moved about with the focused energy of a stage director. I, meanwhile, was buried in domestic chaos, scrubbing Leo's crayon art off the walls, soothing a fussy Mia who had caught a cold. Tom handed me a long to-do list. Call the caterer, rent the marquee, notify the relatives. He spoke like a manager assigning tasks. I looked at him and asked quietly, "Don't you find any of this strange?" Tom frowned. "Don't say that, Laura. She's made her decision. Let's just make sure it's done right." I let out a bitter laugh. Done right for who? For her? Or for our fear of what people will say? The mention of gossip made him flinch as if I'd hit a nerve. This family has a reputation to uphold. You know that. On the day of the wedding, the Boston sky was a gloomy, overcast gray. A biting wind howled down the street. An old saying came to mind. When the winter winds blow, trouble follows. I hadn't believed it until I stepped outside and saw the line of cars parked along the curb. A sound system played quiet jazz, and the low hum of conversation and laughter filled the air. The first floor was crowded with tables. The scent of catered roast chicken, wild rice, and baked brie wafted through the house. It looked festive, but I felt like I was at an inquest. Eleanor appeared in a tasteful emerald green dress, her hair in an elegant chignon, her makeup heavier than usual. She moved through the room like a queen, and people parted for her. Aunt Carol, from Tom's side of the family, pulled me aside, her voice a stage whisper everyone could hear. "Laura, darling, your mother-in-law is really something, isn't she? Marrying a boy young enough to be her grandson." I gave the textbook daughter-in-law response. "As long as she's happy, that's all that matters." Aunt Carol chuckled. "Oh, of course. Honor thy father and mother. Though in this case, it seems to be honor thy mother, and the rest of the family will fall in line." I was about to turn away when Dylan walked in. He was even more handsome in person than in the photos, tall, with clear skin, perfectly styled hair, and a crisp, white button-down shirt tucked into tailored slacks. He carried a gift basket of artisanal fruit and smiled a perfectly measured smile. He greeted Eleanor first, then his eyes swept the room, finally landing on me. "You must be Laura," he said, his voice as smooth as silk. "I'm Dylan. I'm so grateful to you and Tom for helping put this all together for me and your mom." The words "you" and "your mom" sounded polite, but I sensed they were carefully calculated. He was positioning himself as the respectful, younger man to win over the relatives. I nodded, keeping my distance. "I'm Laura. Make yourself at home." Dylan's eyebrow twitched slightly, as if he'd registered my formal tone. Then he smoothed his expression. He turned to Tom and extended a hand. "It's an honor to meet you, sir. Eleanor has told me what a devoted son you are." Tom, flustered, shook his hand. "Ah, hello. Welcome." I noticed Dylan's hands, manicured nails, a polished silver ring. They weren't the hands of someone who did manual labor. His conversations were peppered with, "Yes, ma'am," and "Thank you, sir," as smooth and rehearsed as a script. The guests murmured their approval. Eleanor's new husband is so charming. But all I could hear in my head was a warning. When something is too sweet, beware the poison. The ceremony was brief, but had enough formal touches to satisfy Eleanor's sense of propriety. During the toast, she stood in the center of the living room, her voice clear and strong. "I have lived my whole life for my children. Now, I am choosing to live again, for myself. I don't care what anyone says." She looked directly at the row of relatives, her smile a challenge. "Anyone who interferes will have to answer for it." The room fell quiet. I heard someone cough. Tom stood beside me, his shoulders tense. I knew he was terrified of his mother being embarrassed. so terrified he had forgotten to even glance at his wife to see where I stood in all of this. Later, as I was clearing plates, Dylan drifted over. He picked up a platter of appetizers, his voice loud enough for others to hear. "Laura, let me get that. You've got your hands full with the little ones." It was an instant way to score points. But as he spoke, his eyes darted toward the grand staircase. I saw it clearly, not the curious glance of a newcomer, but the assessing gaze of an appraiser. He looked at the carved oak banister, the plaster ceiling medallions, the antique secretary desk where Eleanor sometimes kept her keys and papers. Then his gaze traveled up, fixing on the third floor, where the door to Eleanor's private suite was closed. I walked past him, deliberately slowing my pace. Dylan, thinking no one was watching, let his smile falter for a second. His eyes lingered on the third floor, for a moment too long. It made the hairs on my arms stand up. Tom pulled me into the kitchen while guests were mingling. "Can you please not look so miserable?" he hissed. "People will think we don't support her." I kept my voice low but sharp. Did you see the way he was looking at this house? Like it was a prize he just won. Tom waved it away. "You're overthinking it. He's young, he's new here. Of course, he's looking around." I looked him in the eye. Looking around is normal. Staring at the third floor like a hawk casing a vault is not. Tom's face tightened. "Laura, please, for my sake, let's just get through this. As long as Mom is happy." I didn't argue anymore. That phrase, "as long as Mom is happy," felt like a heavy lid, slamming shut on anything I might have to say. By the end of the evening, as the guests thinned out, I saw Dylan standing alone near the bottom of the staircase. He was fiddling with a lighter, his eyes once again fixed on the third floor. As I walked past, he turned and smiled. "This is a big house, isn't it? The view from the top floor must be amazing." "Whether it's amazing or not depends on who owns it," I said flatly. Dylan let out a soft chuckle. "Of course, I was just curious." But his curious sounded more like confirming. I picked up Mia, who had fallen asleep on a chair. A piece of my grandmother's wisdom echoed in my mind. Watch people when they think no one is watching. Dylan's performance was flawless, but his eyes, in that unguarded moment, couldn't act. The morning after the wedding, I woke up earlier than usual. It wasn't excitement. It was the unease of having a stranger in the house. I felt a need to stand guard with my own two eyes. The sky was still a hazy gray, and a cold draft slipped through the window frames. I measured out oats to make porridge for Leo and warmed a bottle for Mia. All the while, I was listening to the footsteps on the second floor. Dylan appeared in the kitchen doorway, dressed in a neat t-shirt and jeans, his hair perfectly combed. He smiled. "Morning, Laura. Let me give you a hand with that." He rolled up his sleeves and began washing a bundle of kale, his movements precise, not a single drop of water splashing on the counter. It was the kind of practice perfection designed to disarm. Eleanor came down a few minutes later, a completely different woman from the stern matriarch I knew. She wore a bright-colored cardigan and small pearl earrings, and she moved with a lightness, as if afraid to disturb the new atmosphere. She watched Dylan wash the kale and smiled. "You see? A man who helps in the kitchen is a man who loves his wife." I nearly choked. She had used those exact words to scold Tom a year ago when he'd forgotten to take out the trash. I stayed silent. The new favorite gets the praise. The old-timer gets the scrutiny. When Tom came downstairs, he saw the scene and let out a visible sigh of relief. He turned to me and whispered, "See? He's a decent guy." I didn't answer. I just watched as Dylan placed the colander of kale perfectly on the edge of the sink, the handle pointing outward, exactly as Eleanor insisted, the habit of someone who had been here much longer than a day. Breakfast was peaceful. Dylan even fed Mia a few spoonfuls of porridge, and she giggled, wrapping her little arms around his neck. Eleanor watched them, her eyes glistening. She's taken a liking to her new stepdad. The word stepdad felt like a splinter under my skin, but I kept my lips sealed. Later that morning, Eleanor asked me to go up to her room to get her sewing kit to mend a tear in Leo's shirt. I walked up to the third floor and stood before her door, a place that had always been off limits. Normally, I would knock and wait. Today, the door was ajar. The room smelled of a new, expensive cologne. As I picked up the sewing kit, I noticed a familiar manila folder on her desk, tied with a red ribbon. Eleanor, who was adjusting her hair in the mirror, saw me looking. Her voice was light but firm. "Those are my personal papers, Laura. It's not polite to be curious." "Of course," I said quietly. "I was just thinking, with so many people in and out of the house lately, we should be careful with important documents like the deed." Eleanor spun around, her smile vanishing. What are you implying? I kept my voice even. I'm not implying anything. I'm just suggesting we be cautious. She smirked. Cautious for my sake? Or for yours? The question was a sharp reminder of my position. A daughter-in-law had no right to caution, only to comply. I bowed my head slightly. For the whole family's sake. She waved a dismissive hand. Worry about the kitchen, not my affairs. Don't presume to know more than your station allows. The rebuke was quiet, but it stung. I took the sewing kit and left, reminding myself that in this house, even a well-intentioned word could be twisted into an offense if it contradicted her will. That afternoon, Dylan invited Tom out for coffee to talk guy stuff. Tom was hesitant, but Eleanor urged him on. Go, son. A man needs friends. You can't spend your whole life tied to the kitchen. The hypocrisy was bitter. So, being tied to the kitchen was a flaw. Unless you were the new husband, in which case it was a virtue. With Tom gone, it was just me, Eleanor, and the children. Eleanor lay on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, occasionally smiling to herself. While I was hanging laundry, I noticed she would text quickly, then hide her phone under a cushion, as if afraid of being seen. When it was time to cook dinner, she called out, Make something Dylan would like tonight. He's a young man. He needs a good meal to keep his strength up. I gripped the kitchen knife, my hand tightening. I asked, very softly, How do you know what he likes so well already, Eleanor? She shot me a look. I know. I don't need you to question me. I laughed silently. The woman who once criticized me for making frivolous dishes was now obsessing over the palate of a man she'd just met. It's true that a single kindness can mean the world, but in this house, kindness was not distributed equally. Tom came home that evening in high spirits. Dylan knows a lot of people. Laura. He has so many connections. He said, if I ever need anything, I should just ask. Connections for what? I asked. You know, business stuff, he said vaguely. Then he lowered his voice. I'm trying to get some funding together for a project. Mom promised she'd help me look into it. I looked at him. So, his newfound peace of mind wasn't just about his mother's happiness. It was about the potential for a new pipeline to what he wanted. I didn't blame Tom for being ambitious. I just saw how easily he could be led. Just then, Dylan walked into the living room, carrying a bag of fruit, a bright smile on his face. Bought some grapes and apples for the kids. Gotta keep them healthy. He sat down, crossing his legs as if he owned the place. He looked around and said casually, This is a great house. Must be worth a couple million, at least. The question, light as a feather, landed like a stone in my gut. Tom chuckled nervously. Oh, I don't know. It's Mom's house. Dylan nodded. Of course. Just curious. In this economy, a good house is a blessing. I watched his smile, still perfectly polite, and I heard a dry, clicking sound in my mind, like a lock falling into place. I knew then that I had to do something. I had to start paying attention. I would remember his comings and goings, remember where Eleanor kept her keys, remember every just curious question he asked. Because I understood that while a wise bird sings a clear song, a different kind of predator often speaks in the sweetest tones, coaxing you to open the door yourself. The next morning, as I was hanging laundry on the second-floor balcony, my phone buzzed with 3 consecutive texts in the family group chat. The sender was Eleanor. I am taking a personal retreat for 7 days. Anyone who disturbs me will be considered disrespectful. The 3rd floor is off limits. No one is to come up. I will take care of my own needs. I read the messages, and my fingers went cold. A personal retreat was one thing, but this sounded like a royal decree. Before I could process it, Tom came upstairs, his eyes glued to his own phone. You heard her, Laura, he said, his voice stern. Do not go up there. Doesn't this seem strange to you? I asked. A retreat with a lockdown? Tom frowned. She just got married. She needs her privacy. Privacy is closing a door. I shot back, trying to keep my voice even. This is issuing a restraining order against her own family. He sighed. Laura, don't make this a bigger deal than it is. We do what she says. Just then, we heard a metallic click from downstairs. I leaned over the railing and saw Dylan, bent over, installing a brand new deadbolt on the 3rd floor door. He worked quickly and efficiently, not asking for permission. Tom saw it too, his jaw tightening for a moment before he turned away, as if refusing to see. The shiny brass of the new lock cast a dark shadow on the wooden door. The sight of it made my throat feel tight. From that moment on, the rhythm of the house changed, as if a curtain had been drawn down the middle. Eleanor and Dylan vanished from the first floor. They didn't come down for meals, for drinks, or to ask how Leo's art class was, or if Mia was still coughing. They had retreated to the third floor and pulled up the ladder, leaving us to fill in the blanks below. For the first dinner after the decree, I made a simple chicken noodle soup and grilled cheese for the kids. After setting the table, I hesitated, looking up the stairs. I told myself Tom should take the tray up, but in the end, it was me. He had taken a work call and disappeared into his office, leaving me with his sigh and the clatter of dishes. I carried the tray up to the third-floor landing and stood before the newly fortified door. I knocked softly. "Eleanor? I've left dinner out here for you." There was no reply. I placed the tray on the floor, like an offering at a temple. A minute later, the door opened a crack just wide enough for a hand to emerge. The hand pulled the tray inside with a swift, silent motion. The door clicked shut immediately. No thank you. No word at all. I stood there, frozen. For the first time since I'd married into this family, I didn't feel like a resident. I felt like a delivery driver. Down in the kitchen, Leo was hugging a pillow. "Mommy, why isn't Grandma eating with us?" Mia pouted. "Guanma?" I choked back a lump in my throat and forced a smile. "Grandma is tired. She's resting upstairs. If you two are good, you can have ice cream later." Leo's lip jutted out. "But I want Grandma to read me a superhero story." I turned away to wash the dishes, the running water a poor cover for the ache in my chest. For a week, our house operated on a bizarre schedule. 2 separate worlds under one roof. The first floor was filled with the sounds of children, the gentle click of the rice cooker, and the patter of my footsteps. The third floor was a zone of silence, punctuated only by the occasional flush of a toilet, the sound of drawn-out footsteps, and the definitive click of the lock. A constant reminder, do not cross this line. Tom became more distant. He left earlier, came home later. When he was home, he spoke less, as if afraid his words might get him in trouble. Once, I confronted him. "You don't think this is abnormal? She's your mother. Why can't you just go up and ask if she's okay?" He scowled. "She said no one is to go up. Do you want me to be the disrespectful son?" A sad smile touched my lips. "And what about me? I can be whatever you need me to be, as long as it keeps the peace, right?" He fell silent and changed the subject, like someone throwing a blanket over a smoldering fire. On the third day, I noticed something else. The amount of food I sent up was always gone. One day, I purposely made a smaller portion, thinking it was just for Eleanor, but the tray came back empty, including the fruit I'd added. That meant 2 people were eating up there, and they had healthy appetites. On the evening of the 4th day, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Leo and Mia were asleep. I was folding laundry when I heard a noise from the 3rd floor. It wasn't footsteps. It was a dragging sound, something heavy, followed by a dull thump on the floor. I went rigid, my heart pounding. I crept to my bedroom door and peeked into the dark hallway. The landing light cast long, distorted shadows. A moment later, another thump, and then silence. I turned to Tom, but he was on his phone, pretending not to hear. "Tom," I whispered. "Did you hear that?" He glanced up, his voice flat. "Probably Mom, moving some furniture." "Moving what, at this hour?" He snapped. "Laura, stop it. You're just making things worse." I bit my lip. People talk about the man of the house, but it felt like the head of our house was now a shiny brass deadbolt. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind whistled through the window cracks. A chilling sound. I listened to the steady, peaceful breathing of my children. But my mind was filled with the image of that closed door and the hand that snatched the food tray like a secret. I knew this wasn't a personal retreat. It was a deliberate maneuver, and the person upstairs was leading the entire family down a path we couldn't see. The next morning, I dropped Leo off at his art class and then took Mia for her checkup. The air in Brookline was sharp, and the local market was bustling. People haggled over vegetables and fish, their voices a lively chorus of people afraid to miss a bargain. I was afraid, too, but not of missing a sale. I was afraid of losing my composure. When I got home, I had just put down my grocery bags when I heard the 3rd floor lock click. Dylan came downstairs alone, holding a glass of water and chewing gum loudly. He glanced at me with a lazy, dismissive smile. "Took the kids out early, huh?" "I had errands," I said curtly. "Ah," he replied, then walked straight to the front door, his slippers shuffling on the tile. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't even glance at the living room he had so carefully pretended to admire just days before. Eleanor was nowhere to be seen. I made a simple lunch for Mia, and me a bowl of leftover chicken soup. Mia sat in her high chair, playing with her spoon and babbling. Dada, Dada. I cooed at her. Daddy's at work, sweetie. You eat up, but my throat felt tight, like I'd swallowed a fish bone. Late that afternoon, I was wiping down the kitchen counters when a phone started ringing in the living room. It wasn't mine, it was Eleanor's, the one she usually left on the end table. She almost always had it with her, but today she'd forgotten it. I was going to ignore it, but it kept buzzing insistently. The screen lit up with a notification that made me freeze. Transaction successful. I'm not a snoop. I believe in minding my own business. But in this house, I was forced to live by Eleanor's rules while she broke all of them, locking doors, cutting off contact, and now, this money. The screen was still on. I glanced at it quickly, just long enough to read. Transfer of $4,800 complete. Then another one popped up. Transfer of $5,200 complete. They were less than an hour apart. My hands went cold, a clammy sweat forming on my palms despite the chill in the air. I hesitated for only a second. Then, a mother's instinct for self-preservation took over. I quickly snapped a photo of the screen with my own phone, not to cause harm, but to have proof if I was later accused of lying. Just after I put the phone back, it buzzed again. Another transfer. $3,900. I wondered where all this money was coming from and where it was going. Just then, Tom came home, looking exhausted. I watched him for a moment, then asked in a casual tone, "Has Mom been making any large money transfers lately?" He was drinking a glass of water and stopped mid-swallow. "Why do you ask?" I didn't show him the picture. I just said, "I saw her phone light up with a bunch of transaction alerts." He sighed, like I'd hit a sore spot. "She's giving Dylan some money to get settled. They just got married. He needs to buy some things." A bitter laugh escaped me. Eleanor's idea of getting settled cost more than my budget for the kids for an entire year. I pressed on, my voice slow. "Do you remember when Mia had that fever, and I bought that expensive European formula? What did your mother say to me then?" Tom's face tightened. "Don't bring up the past." I looked him in the eye. "It's not the past if the double standard is still here. She called me wasteful for spending $100, but now thousands flying out the door is just getting settled." He slammed his glass down harder than necessary. "Laura, stop it. It's her money. She can spend it how she wants." My voice grew tense, but I kept it low for the children's sake. "Is it her money, or is it family money?" He avoided my gaze. "The house is in her name. She can do whatever she wants." The phrase "in her name" was like a knife, severing all my arguments. I paused, then asked the question I feared most. "Are you asking her to sign something for you?" He flinched, his eyes blinking rapidly. "Who told you that?" "I heard you on the phone the other day," I said, cutting to the chase. "You're in a tight spot, aren't you?" He rubbed his forehead, his voice dropping. "Yeah. I'm trying to raise some capital. This new venture needs it. Mom promised she'd co-sign some papers for me." "What papers?" I asked. "Business papers," he said vaguely. I smiled, but it was a cold, humorless smile. "You say, business papers, just like she says, personal retreat. It sounds innocent, but no one knows what's really inside." Tom frowned. "Don't be cynical." I leaned in, studying his face. "Are you afraid of making her angry, or are you afraid she won't sign?" He said nothing. His silence was the answer. I suddenly remembered the old saying, "You can't preach virtue on an empty stomach." Tom needed capital, so his duty to his wife was suddenly taking a back seat. I didn't blame him for needing money. I just felt a profound sadness that my children and I had been placed in a position where our security depended on the whims of others. That night, I bathed Mia and rocked her to sleep. Leo lay beside me and asked, "Mommy, is Grandma going to buy me a new toy truck?" I choked up and stroked his hair. "If you're a good boy, everyone will love you." But I knew, in this house, love was sometimes measured by which side you were on. When the house was quiet, I looked at the photo on my phone again. The numbers seemed to leap off the screen like wet ink. I asked myself, if the money keeps flowing like this, what if one day the demand isn't for settling in money, but for the house itself? I sat alone on the edge of the bed, listening to the wind and the distant sound of traffic. But inside my house, a storm was raging, and no one wanted to name it. I didn't want to be the suspicious daughter-in-law, but I couldn't afford to be the blind one either. They say honesty is the best policy, but in a dangerous place. Being too honest can simply make you a fool. The anniversary of Arthur's death, Tom's father, was always a significant event in this family. He had been gone for years, but his portrait hung in the most prominent spot in the living room, a place of honor no one could enter without acknowledging. In the past, Eleanor treated this day like a final exam in family etiquette. If the memorial dinner was missing a single one of Arthur's favorite dishes, she would give me a look that questioned my entire worth as a daughter-in-law. But this year, she remained in her silent retreat on the third floor, leaving me to manage everything alone. I went to the market early. The cold morning air was thick with the smell of fresh fish and damp earth. I bought a free-range chicken, a bunch of fresh parsley, a bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums, and a small, perfectly baked apple pie for the offering. I counted every dollar, the memory of those money transfers like a thorn in my mind. Back home, as I set down the groceries, Mia toddled over and hugged my leg. Leo proudly showed me a drawing of a superhero he'd made in class. Asking if he could hang it up, I smiled and ruffled his hair. My heart a tangled mess. This is what it is to be a mother. No matter the turmoil, you must provide a peaceful face for your children to hold on to. I began cleaning the memorial shelf, polishing the silver candlesticks, and tidying the display. The faint scent of old wood and dried flowers reminded me of my first year here, when I had nervously placed the memorial utensils in the wrong direction. Eleanor had stood behind me and said, "Carelessness in honoring the dead brings hardship to the living." Back then, I was terrified. Now, I was still careful, not out of fear, but because I believed in honoring memory. It was a family tradition, not a weapon for scolding. When Tom came home for lunch, I said gently, "This afternoon, could you go up and ask your mother what specific dishes she wants for Dad's memorial? I don't want to miss anything." He picked up his fork, his tone indifferent. "You can ask if you want," but she said not to disturb her. I looked at him. It's his memorial. Asking a question is a sign of respect. He sighed. "Just do what you did last year. It'll be fine." I swallowed my frustration. After lunch, I put Mia down for her nap, set Leo up with his cartoons, and walked to the stairs. My heart began to beat faster, whether from the cold or the growing sense that the third floor was a forbidden territory with its own laws. I stopped on the landing, before the door with its shiny new lock. I knocked gently. "Eleanor? It's Laura. I just have a quick question about the memorial dinner." Silence. I waited, then knocked again, softer this time. "I just want to make sure everything is perfect." Still, nothing. The silence was so complete. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I was about to turn back when I heard fast footsteps behind me. It was Tom, his face dark with anger. He pulled me away from the door and hissed, "What are you doing?" "She sent a text." I was stunned. "I'm asking about his father's memorial." "What's wrong with that?" He kept his voice low, as if afraid the people upstairs would hear. "What's wrong is that you're being disrespectful. She asked for privacy, and you keep pushing." I felt a lump in my throat. "You call this a retreat? She's locked the door. She won't eat with us. She won't even see her own grandchildren." His eyes widened. "Watch what you say. That's my mother." Suddenly, a surge of anger washed over me. I didn't want to yell, but my own dignity felt cornered. I spoke slowly, deliberately. "I am just trying to uphold a family tradition. The memorial is about all of us, not just one person's privacy." Tom sneered, and his next words felt like a slap. "Or maybe you're just jealous." I froze. Jealous. Jealous of my mother-in-law and her young new husband. The accusation was so vile. It made me sick. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice trembling. He was agitated now. "You're always finding fault, always making things difficult. You can't stand to see her happy, can you?" At that exact moment, the third floor door creaked open. Not all the way, just a few inches. Dylan stood in the gap, dressed in casual loungewear, his face a mask of calm. He looked at me, then at Tom, and a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. It was a smile that didn't need a sound to feel like an insult. He said nothing, just pulled the door closed with a soft click, a sound that seemed to seal my humiliation. I stared at the closed door, my throat suddenly dry. I turned to Tom, fighting for my last shred of composure. "Did you see that? He's mocking me. I'm your wife, the mother of your children. And you think I'm jealous?" Tom looked away. "Don't make a scene. Someone will hear." I laughed. A hollow, joyless sound. In this house, when I tried to be respectful, I was disturbing. When I expressed my hurt, I was making a scene. But the people upstairs, with their locked doors, mysterious money transfers, and secretive behavior, were just needing privacy. I walked back down the stairs, Mia still sleeping in my arms. She stirred, her little hand touching my hot cheek. I swallowed hard, telling myself to be patient, but I couldn't help but feel a deep, aching pity for myself. Patient for whom? For people who took my silence as their right. That evening, I sat alone, looking at the ingredients I'd bought for the memorial dinner. The yellow chrysanthemums seemed to mock me with their brightness. I understood then that this day wasn't just about lighting a candle. It was a mirror, reflecting who was truly upholding tradition and who was using tradition as a gag. That night, the cold deepened. The wind howled through the window frames, and the sound of maple leaves scraping against the pavement sounded like someone secretly sweeping the yard. Leo was fast asleep, hugging his teddy bear. Mia kept tossing and turning, her nose stuffy from a slight cold. I tucked the blanket around her again and sat up in bed, my eyes wide open in the dark. Tom's words, "Maybe you're just jealous," replayed in my mind like a stain on a white shirt. Not a tear, but a deep, humiliating mark. I had tried to swallow it, to pretend I didn't hear it, because married couples are supposed to resolve their issues behind closed doors. But how could we, when the biggest door in our house was locked, with a stranger on the other side? I could hear Tom's steady breathing beside me. He had fallen asleep quickly, as he always did, escaping conflict by simply closing his eyes. I stared at the ceiling and wondered, if Eleanor doesn't come down for the memorial tomorrow, how will I explain that to the family? She's on a personal retreat? The words sounded both flimsy and ridiculous. Around 1 a.m., Mia started coughing. I picked her up, patted her back, and gave her a little warm water. She drank it, then leaned her sleepy head on my shoulder. As I laid her back down, I heard a sound from the third floor, a soft scrape, like a chair being dragged, followed by a dry, dull thud. It wasn't loud, but in the dead of night, it was terrifyingly clear. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering. It wasn't a fear of ghosts, it was a fear of people. There's a saying, love can make even the ugliest things beautiful. But in this house, I felt something was becoming twisted and ugly, and no one wanted to name it. I slipped out of bed and into the hallway, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. The dim nightlight cast a pale, yellow glow. The sound from upstairs stopped, replaced by the sound of running water from the bathroom. I stood there for a moment, my hand clutching the fabric of my nightgown, and I made a decision. It wasn't impulsive. It was the decision of a mother who needed to know what she was protecting her children from. I walked up the stairs, each step feeling a mile long. When I reached the landing, I stood before the third-floor door, which had been a symbol of defiance for days. But tonight, I saw something different. The new deadbolt wasn't locked. The key was still in it, turned slightly, as if left in a hurry. I froze. After all the warnings, all the drama, they had left the door unlocked? Either they were careless, or they were so confident in our fear that they didn't think anyone would dare to cross the threshold. I swallowed hard and knocked, very softly. "Eleanor? It's Laura." No answer. I called again, quieter this time. "Eleanor, are you all right?" Still silence, except for the steady sound of the shower. I waited a few more seconds, then I pushed the door open. A thick, cloying smell hit me immediately. Cheap cologne, stale cigarette smoke, and damp, recycled air. The room was freezing from the air conditioner, but Eleanor was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back slumped, her hair a mess, and a sheen of sweat on her forehead. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying for a long time. I rushed forward. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" She jumped, startled, like someone caught in a moment of weakness. She pulled the comforter up to her chest, her voice a harsh, raspy whisper. "Get out." I stopped. I had never heard her speak to me in that tone before. It wasn't her usual commanding voice. It was trembling and full of fear. Just then, the bathroom door flew open. Dylan stepped out, a towel wrapped around his waist, his hair wet, a silver chain gleaming on his neck. He looked me up and down, his eyes like ice, and then his lips curled into a sneer. Well, Laura, don't they teach you to knock before entering a married couple's bedroom?" His voice was syrupy sweet but laced with venom. I struggled to stay calm. I did knock. No one answered. I heard a noise, and I was worried about Eleanor. Dylan scoffed. "Worried? Or just snooping?" The accusation felt like a physical blow. My face flushed. but I stood my ground. You need to watch your tone. He took a step closer, the scent of his cologne overpowering. In this house, I am the husband of the owner. He turned to Eleanor, looking for the matriarch I knew, the woman who ran this family. But Eleanor didn't look at me. She stared at the floor, her hands twisting the comforter, her lips moving silently as if she was trying to speak but couldn't. I was heartbroken. Eleanor, please say something. I was just asking if you're okay. She took a shaky breath and managed to utter a single, broken phrase. Just don't interfere in my life. I stood there, nailed to the spot. I looked at her, a woman who had always been as sharp as a razor, now avoiding my gaze. Her shoulders hunched like someone cornered. I suddenly understood. This wasn't the picture of a happy newlywed that Tom imagined. This was the picture of a woman being held captive. Only the chains were invisible. Dylan crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. You should go downstairs, he said, his voice casual. It's late. Don't disturb the peace. He used the word peace like a weapon, the very weapon Eleanor had once used against me. The irony was chilling. I backed out of the room, my hands shaking. Before I closed the door, I took one last look. Eleanor was still staring at the floor, as if swallowing her tears. Dylan was staring directly at me, his expression not of fear of being caught, but of utter contempt for the person who had caught him. I closed the door softly. The lock clicked, a tiny sound, but inside me, something shattered with a deafening crash. The morning after my late-night discovery, I woke up feeling as though I'd swallowed a stone. The early winter air was frigid. I warmed a bottle for Mia and made oatmeal for Leo, trying to keep my hands steady, my face calm, so my children wouldn't see the fractures in their mother's composure. Around 8 a.m., Dylan shuffled down the stairs. He was wearing a tank top and shorts, a stark contrast to his usual polished look. He didn't greet me, just scanned the living room floor and grunted. You should clean in here, Laura. It's getting dusty. I stood up straight, a dish towel in my hand. With 2 small children, a little dust is normal, I said, my voice even. I'll get to it when I have a moment. He smirked. A moment? What are you so busy with all day? The insult was quiet but deeply humiliating. I spent my days raising 2 children, cooking, cleaning, and running errands, and he spoke as if I did nothing. I looked him directly in the eye. I'm busy being a mother, and I'm the daughter-in-law here, not the hired help. His eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a menacingly smooth tone. Would you dare say that in front of your mother-in-law? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was a text directly from Eleanor. Go up to my room and get Dylan's laundry. The pants are stained. Wash them thoroughly. Don't leave any smell. I read the message, and my head swam. Don't leave any smell sounded like an order from a master to a servant, not a request from a mother-in-law. I showed the text to Tom, who had just come downstairs. I thought he would be shocked, but he glanced at it and said casually, Well, Mom asked you to do it. Just get it done. I stared at him in disbelief. Just get it done? He sighed. Laura, we live in her house. If she asks for something, just do it. Don't make a big deal out of it. A bitter question escaped my lips. You want me to do the laundry for your new stepdad? Tom's face immediately darkened. Watch your tone. I gave a humorless laugh. So I'm supposed to quietly do the laundry for the man who was threatening me last night. Tom flinched, but instead of asking what I meant, he defaulted to his usual avoidance. He lowered his voice, as if placating a child. You're overreacting. Just stay out of his way. Let's keep the peace. Peace for who? I asked slowly. He was getting angry. Peace for Mom. She's a newlywed. She needs to be comfortable. I glanced over at Dylan, who was now lounging on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, a smug smile on his face, as if he were watching a play. The feeling of being degraded wasn't loud. It was a slow burn, like hot coals. I picked up Mia and took a deep breath, stopping myself from saying anything more that my children might overhear. I went up to the 3rd floor to collect the laundry. The door was open. As I stepped inside, Eleanor had her back to me. Wash it carefully, she said, her voice cold. Don't let the whites yellow. Yes, Eleanor, I replied. Just one polite phrase to maintain the facade. But as I picked up the clothes, I thought, sometimes a piece of clothing can be as humiliating as a piece of bread if you're forced to accept it on your knees. Downstairs, I threw the laundry in the machine, my hands trembling. Dylan walked by and dropped a comment as if bestowing a favor. Just be patient, Laura. When Mom's happy, the house is peaceful. He used the exact same phrase as Tom, as if they were reading from the same script. I looked at him, my composure surprisingly intact. Don't worry, Dylan. I can be patient, but I won't be a fool. He paused for a half-second, then chuckled. Oh, you have a sense of humor. I'm not joking, I said. I'm just starting to realize I need to change the way I play this game. That afternoon, Tom took a call on the balcony. I overheard a snippet. If Mom doesn't co-sign soon, the whole deal is stuck. My mind flashed to the manila folder I'd seen on Eleanor's desk. That night, after the kids were asleep, I opened a notebook and started writing things down. The time Dylan came downstairs. His attitude, Eleanor's text, Tom's words. These were my anchors. If things went wrong, if my words were twisted against me, I would have a record to stand on. I was done fighting with tears. In this house, tears were seen as weakness, and predators always target the weak. I looked at my sleeping children and made a promise to myself. I can endure a little hardship, but I will not let my children grow up watching their mother be treated with contempt. That night, I didn't feel the same helpless panic. A cold, clear resolve was forming inside me, like a person who has walked through a storm and finally learned how to hold the umbrella correctly. I tossed and turned, finally drifting into a light sleep, only to be jolted awake by a faint rustling sound, like paper sliding against paper. The clock read 2:57 a.m. The house was dark, save for the dim glow of the nightlight. The rustling came again, this time with the scrape of a chair. It was coming from upstairs. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cold on the floorboards. I crept to the stairs, stopping on the second-floor landing, where I was hidden in the shadows. I could hear voices from above. Eleanor's voice was hoarse and broken. I've done what you asked. What more do you want? I froze. She was speaking to him with a deference I'd never heard. Dylan's voice was low and cold. I'll delete it after you sign the papers. Delete what? The word delete hung in the air like a threat. Eleanor let out a small, choked sob. Please don't send it. I couldn't bear it. My blood ran cold. Eleanor, a woman who valued her reputation above all else, was begging. She was on the edge of a cliff. Dylan laughed, a sound devoid of any pity. If you don't sign, you'll be famous by morning. Famous. I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been thrown over me. I knew what he meant. For a woman of her standing, a scandal would be a social death sentence. I've already transferred the money, she stammered. What more do you want? The money was for expenses, he replied calmly. The house is the real prize. You sign the deed over to me, and you can live here in peace. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. The money transfers were just the beginning. The endgame was the house. I remember Dylan's assessing gaze on his wedding day. The manila folder had all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. If I sign, she whispered, you'll delete everything? I'll keep a copy, he said with a smirk in his voice. Just to make sure you behave. My anger was a hot, rising tide. He was creating a leash, one she could never break. I heard the rustle of paper again. Sign here, Dylan commanded. And here. Don't try to negotiate. Give me time, Eleanor pleaded. He laughed again. Time? You have until sunrise. If you don't sign, you'll be a headline. I understood then why Eleanor had been so different. She was trapped in an invisible cage, and every struggle only made the bars tighter. I backed away, my legs weak, but my mind was sharper than ever. I couldn't rush up there. I couldn't tell Tom, not yet. Without concrete proof, I'd be accused of hysteria, and Eleanor, in her terror, would deny everything. I returned to my room and lay down beside my sleeping children, my eyes burning. I knew then that monsters don't just lurk in the dark. Sometimes they sit in your living room, speak with a silver tongue, and use the word dignity to wrap a rope around your neck. The next morning, I took Leo to his art class earlier than usual. On the way home, I made a detour. I met my best friend, Hannah, at a small coffee shop. Hannah was a no-nonsense accountant who had seen every trick in the book. I laid out the facts. The marriage, the locked third floor, the money transfers, the late-night conversation I'd overheard. And most importantly, I told her about the blackmail. Hannah listened, her expression growing grim. Laura, this isn't a family squabble anymore. This is coercion and extortion. But if I say anything, I said, my voice shaking, they'll call me a liar. That's because you're fighting with words, she said, her voice firm. You need something they can't deny. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek, black fountain pen. This is a digital voice recorder. I stared at it. A spy pen? One click to record, one click to stop, she said, demonstrating. Get him to repeat his threat. On tape. And Laura, she added, her eyes serious. You have to give your mother-in-law an escape route. She's terrified of losing face. If you corner her in front of Tom, she'll side with her blackmailer just to save her pride. I held the pen. It was light, but it felt as heavy as a stone. It was a risk, but doing nothing was a bigger one. How do I get her to help me? I asked. You don't need her to be a hero, Hannah said. You just need her to press a button. For someone who's afraid, even that small act is an act of courage. That afternoon, I found my moment. I went up to the third floor with a tray of hot tea, a gesture of old-fashioned respect. Eleanor was sitting by the window, her shoulders slumped. On her desk lay a stack of legal documents. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse. I spoke softly. Eleanor, I'm not here to fight. I'm here because I'm worried. I heard you last night. I heard him threatening you. Her face went pale, then hardened. You were eavesdropping. I was awake with Mia, I said. And I'm scared for you. He's using your reputation to control you. That's not dignity. It's a cage. Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. I placed the pen on the table between us. You don't have to scream for help, I said. You just have to press this button. Let him say the words himself. I promise, I will not let you be publicly humiliated. I just want to stop him. She stared at the pen, her hand trembling. Finally, after a long, agonizing silence, her fingers closed around it. She didn't look at me, but whispered, He'll be up here tonight. It was the only consent I needed. That night, I waited on the second-floor landing, hidden in the shadows. The conversation started upstairs. Just as planned. Have you made up your mind? Dylan's voice drifted down. Sign it, and this all goes away. And you'll delete it? Eleanor's voice was shaky, but she was asking the right question. I'll keep a copy, he sneered. For insurance. This house will be in my name. If you don't sign, you'll be famous by morning. I always keep my promises. My heart ached for her, but I stayed put. The recording was everything. Finally, after an eternity, the voices stopped. I slipped back into my room. The next day, I knew, would not be another family argument. It would be a reckoning. The next morning, I gathered them in the living room. Tom, still groggy, Eleanor, her face a pale mask, and Dylan, confident as ever. I have something I think you all need to hear, I said calmly. I pressed play. The room went silent as Dylan's voice filled the air. The house will be in my name. If you don't sign, you'll be famous by morning. Tom froze, his face a canvas of shock and horror. Eleanor bowed her head, her hands clenched. Dylan's smirk vanished. That's fake. It's edited, he sputtered. Then we can take it to the police, I said, my voice steady. They have forensic audio experts. Tom finally turned on him. What have you done to my mother? Dylan looked at Eleanor, trying to regain control. Honey, tell them it's a lie. But Eleanor was broken. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. The fight was over. I looked at Dylan. Log out of every cloud account. Change the passwords in front of me. Delete everything. And then get out of this house. He glared at me, his eyes full of hatred, but he did it. With every click of the mouse, his power evaporated. When he was done, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The silence he left was heavy. Eleanor finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Tom rushed to her side. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't see. He turned to me, his voice choked with shame. Laura, I'm sorry. I was a fool. I didn't offer empty forgiveness. You chose to be blind, Tom, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You let me be disrespected, and you almost let your mother be destroyed because you were afraid to stand up. He didn't argue. He just nodded, accepting it. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes red and raw. Laura, she whispered, I'm sorry. It was a miracle. I didn't say, it's okay. I said, don't ever let anyone hold your dignity hostage again. From now on, this family's affairs, the money, the property will be transparent. She nodded, then asked fearfully, Are you going to the police with that recording? I looked at her, at the proud woman so terrified of gossip. No, I said, I won't humiliate you, but I am keeping a copy, in a safe place, just in case he ever thinks about coming back. In the weeks that followed, the house began to heal. Eleanor was quieter, more subdued. Tom started acting like a true partner, helping with the kids, sharing the chores. One evening, he sat with me in the kitchen. I always thought being a good son meant agreeing with her, he said. I never realized that sometimes it means protecting her from herself. A few months later, a news story broke. A young man had been arrested in a multi-state blackmail and extortion ring, targeting wealthy, older women. His face was plastered on the screen. It was Dylan. That night, there was a soft knock on my bedroom door. It was Eleanor, holding a steaming bowl of homemade chicken soup. She looked at me, her eyes full of an emotion I'd never seen before: gratitude. I thought, "You might be cold," she stammered. I took the bowl, my throat tight. It was more than soup. It was a peace treaty. I sat with the warm bowl in my hands, watching my children sleep. The silence in the house was no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of a locked door. It was the quiet calm after a storm. I had learned that dignity is precious, but it cannot be preserved by sacrificing your voice. Sometimes, to truly keep a house safe, you have to be the one willing to unlock the door and let the truth, no matter how ugly, come pouring out.